Hi there, good morning. I've been getting a lot of directive to kind of help understand some of the distortions that we've been fed as far as what we really are and how to clarify some of that. And one of the places I wanted to start was with the chakra system, chakra. It's true, we have 7 chakras that line up, a lot of this first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. We can go over any of that, but it's kind of out there quite a bit, so I don't really want to waste anybody's time on that. I'd kind of like to unpack them a little bit differently and see what everybody thinks about that. So I have my little board over here, some pens. I thought I would kind of try to do it visually. This isn't actually based off anybody's work because you can't really find this yet. But it's going to become quick. Like, this is something that people will wake up with. So we've got our center column. These pens don't really work. You can't see shit. Okay, but we have our central column. Let me try to use something else. There's a darker one. So this is our central column, where typically people identify that they have, you've got like first chakra, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. Yeah, it's just funny that actually, 7. That we got limited to 7. But so what happened was when it became clear that a certain level of separation was going to occur, we had to morph ourselves into something that could sustain that. And it's something similar, like a hibernation state. Like it's like turning something down to a holding pattern that can withstand a level of density that normally we wouldn't tolerate. And 7 became kind of that code. It's interesting because if you recognize that your 7 is like 1 short of an octave. So if we had included the 8, it would have allowed for a return. You couldn't really get there with that included. So, and our organ systems are all kind of the same way, and you see the worst reflection of that state of separation in allopathic medicine at this point, the way that they separated of systems, and don't really understand how those systems correlate except through a bunch of like scientific gobbledygook that they don't want anybody to understand. So like liver and kidneys, heart, all of these ways that we've come to understand that our organs function is really just how we function in a state of hibernation. So to identify with yourself within a state of hibernation will help you remain in hibernation, but it won't really help you wake up. So that's what we're going to partially do here, is helping us understand what we look like in an awoken state. So in an awoken state, we have a lot more chakras active. We have them even in a sleeping state, but we're not aware of them as directly. And I guess it's more that then our experience of life you know, we're emitters, so I emit a frequency like sonar or something, and life echoes back to me what I've emitted. Then, you know, also including what I've emitted, and that's bouncing back through other filters. But so in our sleep state, we have been emitting primarily through these 7 chakras and experiencing life through those. It doesn't mean that as on a soul level that we aren't still active beyond that, but a lot of us aren't aware of it quite yet. So we've got the 7, and I think one of the things that seemed really important for people to grow into understanding that every chakra is like a dimensional portal. They each have their own note, their own tone. But let's have a little bit of fun here, because I could go on, and like it's exhausting. So these reoccur at intervals. And honestly, you know, they can go on and on. A couple that, like, let's just start slow though, okay? If we were running our scales, so typically we identify with this as the first chakra, root chakra. There's a lot of, again, you know, I'm trying to not necessarily go over stuff that's already out there, but part of what's a little bit important to me is the eradicating of the numbers that we've assigned a little bit, just because we're so linearly trained at this point that it kind of loops us back. If you continue considering this as your first chakra, there's just something about saying first that can disorient what this chakra actually is. This chakra is a starting gate, a pivot point. I wouldn't personally call it your root. I think that if somebody really wanted to connect to their root, I would at least go down and orient around the chakras related to your feet, at least. But then there's also the ones, I mean, anatomically, if you were to try to kind of align them, there'd be the ones between your knees, your inner thighs. Sorry, I just had to check in for a second. Make sure I'm headed on the right track. So the root, I mean, the reason that we still see that one is because it was an access point to maintaining control of this experiment. This was the one that we encoded specifically. You couldn't really do it the same as you went down, because these actually start to be in relation directly to Earth's coding, and this is like kind of where they could break it. Any further down, you couldn't break that connection. So one of the things I'll point out about this one right now is just the level of coding that's in there, contracts. For a lot of us at this point, that one needs to kind of be rebuilt collectively, obviously, but also individually, because unless you've done that work, already. Anyway, this one's got to be addressed. They all need to be addressed. There's like ways of understanding the dimensions that you would enter based on the structure of the chakra itself. I use the terms fixed and mutable just because they're easy to translate over from astrology, but it's pretty consistent that every other through these 7 go fixed, mutable, fixed, mutable, fixed, mutable, fixed. So you've got the root is fixed structure, which doesn't mean, how would we put that? The fixed structure chakras tend to hold a pattern. It reminds me of like the honeycomb, that the comb holds the liquid. It's still made out of something that's transmutable, but it does like to retain structure. Whereas the opposites of each, which would be the even chakras of this diagram, they don't hold structure the same way. So again, I start to identify with them as though they are dimensional portals, which they are. Allows you to see more clearly. Let's see, what else can I just kind of throw in there to make this not too long and overwhelming. So we've got fixed, mutable, we've got getting beyond the 7, we've got the dimensional piece is fascinating, but I think the other challenge is that we tend to assume that as you enter a dimension, that dimension is already fully formed or something, which isn't real, and that gets complicated. I'm going to start with this. I'm going to stop with this. We can also look, we're going to look at the fact of how we then orchestrate our lives, because now shift yourself to maybe thinking of this as like a flute with different holes. So each one is a note, and then we create chords, not C-O-R-D, but C-H-O-R-D. If each chakra is a note, then as we develop, depending on our experience, we'll start to formulate chords out of our notes and play certain of these predominantly collectively. You would hope that somebody that had a happy family home environment is probably playing the 4th, the 2nd, and the 1st pretty cohesively. You'll see in certain forms of success a lot of 3rd, 5th, and 6th. And this is just kind of how we play life because of what we've been given tones to work with. When you play those tones, certain creation happens within those dimensions. And we just haven't been exploring that to our full capacity even. I mean, you really could start there if you wanted to stay within a hibernated state and just kind of play around, because once you start unfurling this and moving beyond the 7, your responsibility goes to a whole different level as a human. You've definitely have to know how to drive as you start going further. Not in a bad way, because actually it's basically like you go from your hibernated state, you're playing solo, and as you get that down so that you can run your scales and like you can create tones, and they do actually match your intention, which that that takes a solid amount of work too. But once you've done that, you can play your tones, your life reflects back and matches your intention, because that's how you can know whether or not you're in tune. When the echo comes back, it's like, okay, how does that sound? Once you've done that and you wake up, then you're playing in the orchestra. And so when you start striking notes, the value of them increases. Not really value, but just, the weight, the responsibility. This is where you'll move mountains. This is where you'll shift skies. This is where you'll know your intergalactic identities. This is where you'll access all memory. So it helps to get these prepped. Well, it's not necessary. It would shift from whether or not you're a observer of the orchestra or participating in it directly. In a funny way, it doesn't really matter, because actually, even though you're not aware, maybe, and I don't mean to speak, like, I don't know who you even are. This is a very freaking weird way for me. I mean, I'm last century. This level of separation wasn't a thing. So now it's like, even though we have so much fucking access, we're barely scratching the surface of what we could be because of this way of transmitting. Thank you, Zach, for talking about human medicine. Anyway, shoot, there was something interesting in there, but I lost it. So I'm going on, and who the hell wants to listen to that? Those are just some starting pieces. Hopefully they're helpful. Cheers.